In sales, we have to understand how to cope with social stress. What do I mean by social stress? It's any time we go into a meeting situation, might be a meeting with a customer, might be a presentation, might be an internal presentation or an internal meeting or a meeting with manager. In sales, we're constantly going into social stress situations, just like this one on my screen here. So this young lady has volunteered to participate in a social stress test. Medical science world running these the whole time. They're testing new products, new theories, whatever it might be. And you can see the social stress test is the exact same scenario that we go through in sales the whole time. So if the medical science world put people into that horrible, nervous, fight, flight, stress response, how do they do that? They put them into meeting situations where people have got to present. We need to recognise that in sales, we need to understand what goes on when we get put under pressure, and only then can we come up with a strategy for fixing it. So what happens when we go into a social stress situation and we get nervous? Now we can't think anymore. Maybe we're kind of getting hot and uncomfortable. Essentially, all that's happening is our emotional brain, the limbic system, is detecting fear. It's coming up with a range of future scenarios that might not be good for us. So, and how the emotional brain does that is it exhibits that to us as a feeling of fear. Now, there's 3 categories of fear that we can be aware of, and every time we feel scared about something, we can say, hey, what category of fear should I put this one in? Now, 3 categories are fear of suffering, that might be physical suffering or emotional suffering. Category number 2 is the fear of failure. I work with salespeople the whole time, and I see people not executing, not taking the action just because deep down they're afraid of it of it failing, right? And then there's fear of conflict, and I added in brackets here, or not being liked. Again, stop salespeople in their tracks. Now, when we're in front of the customer, I think it's conflict, I think it's fear of failure, I think it's fear of suffering, I think it's anxiety about, hey, they might ask me a question, I might not know the response. And when you get into that state, if you're not managing your body and your mind, you're just going to go into this fight, flight, freeze stress response. And we don't want that to happen. Because when we go into that response, into that stress response, all of a sudden it's all mixed up in our brains now, because now all of that, the information that's being processed in our brains, is not being processed by our kind of like executive center. No. Now everything is being handled by our emotional brain. And our emotional brain, frankly, just wants us to get the hell out of there. But we can't, because we're in a meeting. We can't run away, we can't fight anyone, and hey, freezing, well, that's not cool either, is it? So we need to understand that it's important to control our emotional state in those high pressure situations, because we're going to lose empathy. If you think about your ancestors, so if you went back 100 generations when the world was a very different place, it did not pay your ancestors to be too empathetic when they were in tough times, when they're experiencing anxiety, probably about food sources. Do we need to move? Are we at threat of the weather? All of these things our ancestors had to cope with, and our brains are no different to theirs. And of course, they had to make some tough decisions. Who survives in the tribe? Who eats first? Who doesn't eat? Who do we leave behind? And so, of course, part of the stress response is that we lose empathy. And that's no good in sales, is it? We need to be calm and empathetic at all times, and we need to therefore have a way of switching off that fight, flight, stress response.